Welcome to SkinSync, the official podcast of Elevate-Derm Alliance, your trusted source for the latest in dermatology. Join our hosts for real clinician perspectives and expert guest insights as they explore everyday dermatology topics with practical takeaways. Stay informed with up-to-date clinical information and discover strategies to improve practice flow and efficiency. Please note, this podcast is for informational purposes only and not a substitute for professional medical advice. Always consult a licensed healthcare provider before making medical decisions. Clinicians must rely on their own judgment and training in all patient care situations.
Thank you so much, and welcome. Welcome, everyone, to the very first live recording of the SkinSync podcast. Bucci and I are so excited to be able to provide this content live at Elevate here in beautiful Park City. So thank you all for being here, and we only have a coveted 15 minutes with the amazing Douglas DiRuggiero. We want to thank our sponsors, Arcutis, who have been so incredibly wonderful to provide support for this podcast and specifically this episode. So Bucci and I are going to dive right in, and Bucci's going to start by questioning Douglas on corticosteroid stewardship.
So before we kind of dive in, I want to mention Douglas and his daughter Margaret actually published a beautifully written article. I would highly encourage all of you guys to go online and read it. It's in the JCAD January issue. Beyond Skin Deep, the systemic impact of topical corticosteroids in dermatology. It's completely free. Please go online, download that article. It's beautifully written. So Douglas, first question I have for you is really about the history of corticosteroid use in inflammatory skin disorders. Give us some background briefly about kind of what started it.
You know, history's my jam, so I appreciate this question. We've been putting things on the skin for a very long time, all the way back to Egyptian times. We have documentation of them using tar, etc. Move up to the 1700s, they were using mercury salts for syphilis, 1800s salicylic acid topically for rheumatoid arthritis. But in 1952, so when the first trial came out, when Marion Sulzberger compounded a cortisone powder, the hydrocortisone acetate 17 powder, and published a paper on it. And in my opinion, that changed the more so than anything else, changed the trajectory of dermatology. Isotretinoins had a huge impact. You could say topical retinoids have, you could say dupilumab, you could say a number of things have changed it for certain diseases. But as an overall panacea of dermatology, that happened when that legendary dermatologist at NYU compounded this for the first time and put it on the skin. And he hypothesized, because just a year prior, the Nobel Prize had been given to two gentlemen for developing corticosteroids, right, and using them for internal problems. And just a year later, we already had problems coming out: Cushingoid syndrome, osteoporosis, weight gain, diabetes. 1 year after the medicine was developed, they already were publishing those trials. But Marion Sulzberger hypothesized that since we were using it topically, we wouldn't see the same internal problems that we're seeing with patients taking oral corticosteroids. And so it's topical, should not see the same problems, but I don't think that that's the case. So it's a balance between steroid phobia and topical corticosteroid stewardship that I think is where we need to be today.
So if my math is correct, topical corticosteroids have been out for almost 75 years. 75 years of use, and yet, due to the low molecular weight, as you talk about in the article, they're very readily absorbed into our system. So should we be scared? Should we be nervous? Or should we just think, oh, it's a topical, it's just on the surface, just, skin deep, haha. After 75 years, what have we learned? And what should we learn about topical steroid use?
Well, we've learned a lot, and it's actually been out for a while. The question is not what have we learned, but what are we going to choose to take and change the way we do things. There's one thing to learn something, it's another thing to take away this knowledge and actually decide if it's going to change your prescribing habits. Because, all the way back to 2006 is probably, I think, the most comprehensive article in the JCAD, written by dermatologists, about the impact of topical corticosteroids on systemic diseases. And they have 40 cases in that paper of children that have used topical steroids ranging between triamcinolone and betamethasone for 1 year or less for 3% of body surface area developing Cushingoid syndrome and adrenal insufficiency. If you move forward to more recent trials where we look at osteoporotic fracture, osteoporosis, ocular events, but not even using steroids around the eyes, corticosteroids on the ears, other parts of the body, increasing ocular pressure, increasing cataract formation. We think about if we just don't keep it away from the eyes. So obviously, we all use steroids. We just heard a lecture about the importance of not being scared of using high-potency steroids in the genital area. So this is not throw it under the bus, but we now live in a therapeutic time period where we have alternatives for the majority of our dermatologic conditions that can be utilized and really should be first line. It's just a question of can we change the paradigm, the insurance, the access, and even ourselves to begin to move in that direction.
You describe using topical steroids as essentially a double-edged sword, right? We've got tons of benefits, obviously some major risks that come with that. What are some of the factors that increase the risk of systemic absorption of these medications? Is it mainly location? Is it potency? Is it formulation? What are the factors?
Gosh, I think we would all know it's all the above. Obviously, you use steroids and you occlude it, it increases its absorption. You put it in a fold, it increases the absorption. It used to be when I first stepped in, it was always the vehicle ointments were more potent than lotions, but now with technology, that's not always the case. So, but vehicle still plays a part. It's the age, I mean, I say when I lecture on this, I'm looking at the man in the mirror here, because like I've said, I've seen almost 250,000 derm patients, and I've written a lot of steroids. I may be one of the highest triamcinolone writers in our state. But I can't deny what I have probably contributed to somewhat. So if I get an elderly patient that's got, atopic dermatitis starts at age 65 also, right? 70.
Sure.
You get a new onset psoriasis, and I put them on topical steroids. Am I really thinking about this kind of kyphotic elderly woman? Should I be giving her topical steroids without knowing where her rating is for osteopenia? Should I have a patient who's got a strong family history of diabetes or has diabetes? Am I thinking about how much I'm raising their sugar by giving them topical corticosteroids? I haven't thought about that all the time until recently. I mean, just being transparent with you. I'm trying to develop something in my own office about how do I keep track cumulatively of how much topical steroids people are being given by us and by others. The allergists are much better at this. They are much more steroid conscious than we are because they're giving it to them in inhaled forms, nasal forms, oral forms, and they're very cautious, and they have a lot of tracking systems. I talk to my allergy colleagues. We don't really want to do that in dermatology. I don't think we want to lay that burden on us. I'm not sure we want to recognize the problems that we are potentially contributing to, and we want to be able to just keep using these things. But I'm thinking we need to have a change.
But I think you were so astute to say we need to look at ourselves in the mirror and ask, are we part of the problem instead of part of the solution? I think that's brilliant to try to set up some way of kind of quantifying how much we're using and how often we're refilling these refills that are being requested. But what if we just said, okay, well, I just won't prescribe clobetasol anymore. I'll just stick to low potency topical steroids. Is it actually true that every single steroid in every kind of formulation is at some potential risk of some kind of adverse event?
Well, everything we do is risk versus benefit. So I think it's just having more consciousness of what we're doing. I've got some information laying right here in my lap. This is a nationwide study held in Taiwan from 2017 to 2020. They looked at 130,000 cases of osteoporosis and did age-matched controls, and then they isolated out only those patients who'd been on topical corticosteroids, no oral steroids documented in their history. So nothing else, no other systemic form of steroids that was documented that they'd ever received. And when they looked at if they had received low-potency corticosteroids, and they'd had to have had it been prescribed for 3 or more years. If they were prescribed low-potency steroids, their odds ratio, or their increased risk of having osteoporosis was 2.2, so that's 2 times more likely. If there was a medium-potency corticosteroid, 2.6, high-potency steroid, 3.4. Okay, and you can look at this article, and I can give it to you afterwards. But that just shows you, even at the low-potency rating, continual use of even low-potency corticosteroids is having a systemic effect, whether that's menstrual abnormalities, osteoporosis, osteoporotic fracture. I have a case here of an 11-year-old who presented with a broken wrist, had been using topical betamethasone for 3 years intermittently for his psoriasis. He never used it longer than 3 weeks at a time. He averaged 3 flares per year for 3 years. and came in when they did a DEXA scan on him, he had negative 2.7, which is full-out osteoporosis, not osteopenia at 11 years old. Those authors actually went so far as to suggest that if we were prescribing a mid or high potency topical steroid, that we get a baseline DEXA scan on all of our kids. Now, I'm not saying that's what I'm advocating through this podcast, but the authors of that paper actually went so far to say that.
Well, that's terrifying.
Yes, very much. So with that said, what are we going to be doing to minimize this risk, right? Because we've always been told maybe no more than 2 weeks at a time, or just treat small body surface areas, but it sounds like there's a risk no matter what we're doing. So what do we do to tell patients to minimize that risk?
Well, I think there's TikTok has helped us out a little bit with some of the steroid phobia that our patients come in, they don't really want to be. They don't want their child put on topical steroids. They don't want them to be on steroids. All I'm trying to do with us as colleagues is say, move past the idea of thinking I'm avoiding steroids because I don't want them to have atrophy, striae, rosacea, acne, hypertrichosis, dyschromia, all those topical cutaneous adverse events. We know about those. I'm just trying to open us up to say we may be impacting things internally. So that may make us do a little bit better of coming up with a monitoring system, a corticosteroid stewardship mindset that's there. We can do that much more easily now that we have these great non-steroidals. I know I don't want to. It's more complex science than just saying they don't have steroids. But when tacrolimus was launched in December of 2000, I remember when that happened. They had a massive, huge party at the AAD the following year.
Back in the days when they could have.
Back when you could. It just didn't have the punch that we wanted, the steroids. And then as we move forward, pimecrolimus and then our first PDE4. But now the new ones that have come out, they have the power that our steroids have. Whether it's topical ruxolitinib, tapinarof, or rofumilast, the newer generations, we now have things that have excellent efficacy, great safety. We don't have to create these complex paradigms. You can use this steroid on your face, this one on your groin, this one on your chest, this one not here, this is for hair bearing, this is not. Use this weak one for this amount of time. Red light, green light, yellow light, here's where you do it. All these kind of things. These newer treatments allow us to use, you don't have to worry about if they're lying to you, not telling you that you're not using it in the groin. You can use it anywhere you want, on your eyelid, in your groin, any place on your body. These things, there's certain parameters with certain ones on the body surface area with topical ruxolitinib, but for the most part, they can be used very safe, low ages. And so it's nice to have those options.
Well, it sounds like you're as excited as we are to have so many options in that non-steroidal category. We have options now, so we do need to take a moment to take a pause and stop and think before prescribing that topical steroid, and think about putting yourself in that parent's shoes and that patient's shoes and deciding what you would want. Treat patients like you want to be treated.
Absolutely. Douglas, we appreciate you so much for being here today. You are a legend, as I like to call you. And we also want to thank our sponsors, Arcutis, for being so generous as to sponsor this podcast. Hopefully you guys learned something today about corticosteroid use and maybe have some other options on the table. And that's all we got. Thank you.
Thank you, Douglas.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here.
Thanks for tuning in to SkinSync. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or Spotify so you never miss an episode. We'd love to hear from you. Send your topic ideas to admin@elevate-derm.com. If your suggestion is featured in a future episode, you'll receive complimentary registration to one of our upcoming conferences. To explore more of Elevate's educational and career resources, visit elevate-derm.com.